I'm finished with my homework. What can I help with?" asked Selma. Mrs. Mays smiled at Selma. "You can set the table," replied Mrs. Mays. Her eyes followed Selma as she took the dishes from the cabinet and started setting them on the table. "She's such a sweet girl," thought Mrs. Mays. "I'm so glad Sal brought her to me." She knew Sal was interested in Selma, and she was happy with his choice. Both of her boys had made great choices in their life partners, she thought with satisfaction. Selma was from the town of Sandera, but she did not show the vigilante powers the other residents had. Selma had hidden her powers from everyone. She had felt out of place and very much wanted to leave. Her chance to leave came when Sal accompanied Alex Avorn's group to Sandera for the weddings of the 3 girls from Sandera to the young men their guardian angels had picked for them. Mark, one of the men, was Alex's brother. Darren, another of the men, was the brother of Miriam Avorn, Alex's wife. While the Avorn group was in Sandera and Selma had seen Sal, she recognized him from her magic mirror. She knew they were meant to be together, so Selma had taken a chance and asked Sal to help her to leave. The council talked to her and gave their approval, and Sal called Mrs. Mace and arranged for Selma to stay with his parents and finish high school. Even though their guardian angels and the magic mirror had indicated Sal and Selma were meant for each other, they both realized Selma was too young for any serious relationship. During the 4 months Selma had been at the Mace home, Sal and Mickey came by regularly to see how Selma was doing. They were all pleased with how the situation was progressing. Selma looked forward to the times when Sal came by. She was quiet when he was around, but her eyes followed him, and she was waiting for the day when Sal decided she was old enough for a closer relationship. Sal's eyes followed Selma also. He was drawn to her, but he was trying to give her time to adjust to his presence. Mickey sometimes teased him about his infatuation with Selma. "You can set 4 extra places," said Mrs. Mace. "Sal and Mickey are going to be stopping by. Sandy and Minnie are coming by also. When I told Sal Sandy and Minnie would be here, and we were having pot roast, he decided to make it in time to eat." Selma laughed. "He does love your pot roast," she agreed, as she hugged the thought of seeing Sal soon to her. Mrs. Mace smiled. "I think he misses spending time with Sandy. They're all so busy. They don't have time to get together like they used to. Sandy is busy with his new job, and with Minnie taking classes at the college, they spend most evenings at home. They are still newlyweds after all." Selma smiled as she thought about Minnie and Sandy. They had visited with Mr. and Mrs. Mace many times in the 4 months Selma had lived with the Maces. Selma and Minnie had become friends, and Selma enjoyed having Minnie around to ask for advice. She was living in a different environment than she was used to in Sandera. Minnie's guidance had been very welcome. "Hello, everyone," called Sandy as he and Minnie entered the door from the garage. Minnie hurried over to give Mrs. Mace a hug. She turned and hugged Selma also. "I hope you don't mind Sandy inviting us to eat your pot roast," said Minnie with a smile. "When he heard what you were cooking, his mouth started watering. I'm sure he could taste it, just thinking about it." Minnie and Selma laughed, and Mrs. Mace smiled with satisfaction. She was happy her boys loved her cooking. "You are both welcome any time. I love having you here," said Mrs. Mays. Minnie gave Mrs. Mays another hug before she turned to Selma and started helping her place the dishes on the table. "How are your classes going?" she asked. "Oh, they're going very well," replied Selma. "I'm ready for finals week after next. I wanted to ask you about the senior prom. The other students are all excited about it, and all the girls talk about is what they're going to wear and who has asked them to the dance." Minnie smiled. "It's a very important time for most of the students. It is a celebration of the end of their high school years." Selma frowned. "Do they expect everyone to go, even if they don't have a date?" Minnie shook her head. "You don't have to go if you don't want to." Minnie looked at Selma thoughtfully. "Hasn't anyone asked you to the dance?"